To understand the next presentation will probably require looking at many of the other presentations, like I'm talking about self-organizing and breakthrough innovation. There's another presentation on self-organizing innovation. I will need the novelty model to explain the architecture I will create. So kind of this is like the ultimate goal work that we're working on with the PhD. So what's it about? First of all, we know that there's an acceleration of innovation. There's another video about global brain and meta system transition that's related more to that. So basically, what we see is that in the acceleration of innovation, are spontaneous breakthrough innovations. And once they happen, you can manage the incremental innovations, but we're never been capable of managing the breakthrough innovations. So while there's an increasing need to manage the breakthrough innovation because, of course, of the acceleration, so you cannot just keep being dependent on chance. So to get a grip on the acceleration, to get a grip on breakthrough innovations, you need a theory to understand it, and that's the part of the novelty research, which is a cybernetic research, meaning we're trying to understand the feedback process, the the control, the regulation, the architecture, the system. And novelty is the common divider between discovery, creativity, and innovation, which all emerge. Um, so basically, novelty emerge, but you can see that for discovery, creativity, and innovation, it becomes more explicit. Discoveries are mostly observed, so you observe discovery. Creativities are synthesized, so you create something new, while innovations are cultivated, um, which I'll not go into much detail. It's a multidisciplinary research. There's cognition, science and technology study, and many others, but there's basically another presentation on the novelty model, so I won't be going too much in detail here. The Agile Enterprise Innovation Planning is basically, the name is inspired from enterprise resource planning, because what you see is that um, before there was an enterprise resource planning, there were these super accounters that were the main resource of a company, and kind of were like the superheroes of a company. And today you see that with innovators that become a kind of it starts again becoming a business revolving around individuals, revolving around personas, and that actually is never a good idea. If you look at it, it's you can see that the enterprise resource planning kind of democratized the operational business. So what we kind of need to do is democratize the innovative business too. So far, people always see it as something impossible because you cannot automate intelligence. Well, basically, if you look at research on intelligence, you see that it's mostly something that is distributed or collective, and there we can actually do a lot of things. But of course, I mean, the name, it's just a theory, right? What we really need to look at is the internet-oriented participative observation. So what we need to do is we really need to understand what is happening online, and what all the things are becoming. And but there are basically two other videos about this, like the self-organizing innovation and the global brain presentation, are going in more depth about trying to understand what is emerging. The other presentation is about the novelty model, so I won't go in details here. Basically, what you see is that there's an architecture of four anticipation processes that each have a kind of a control element mediating the anticipation, controlling the anticipation, for internalizing its mediation, for directing its alignment, for externalizing its regulation, and for learning its coordination. And those four can change if you go to a specific novelty model, and all the anticipation processes, together working on that workspace can actually create things that will change the self-knowledge or the environment. So where the self is the self-knowledge is what you use to actually do actions, and you act of course on the environment. So you have models by modeling here, and with the models you fabricate, but to fabricate make you create new models. So all this is in a bootstrapping relation. So look the other video to understand this model a bit better. But basically what we're trying to understand is how that acts on the creation of knowledge. This is how the Nonaka's Seki model, where you see how tacit knowledge is transferred, how tacit knowledge is shifted to explicit knowledge. So over here you have this socialization. This is a student-apprentice kind of relation. Here you go to local knowledge in several individuals sharing a common lexicon. Basically, this is often just so there's still a lot level of tacitness. I know that Nonaka has in later papers called it group tacit knowledge, for example. But if you go to science and technology, they talk about local knowledge, like Heidegger did a lot of about that. So if you go one further, you see how groups, if they need to collaborate, the knowledge they have needs to be even less tacit, and it needs to be standardized so you can work on it. I think that's a nice example of how this information change can be found in Rouse. There's a book, I forgot the book, name of the book, but there's a chapter called Local Knowledge that kind of better explains this relation. And then of course you got an individual as part of a group, as part of an organization, and these new dimensions allows an individual, based on all this knowledge that's been created, to act differently, and so you get this other loop. This is basically how many different agents allow scientific facts to emerge, and you can actually create a specific novelty model for knowledge creation, and you can actually create another novelty model for agents. So what you see is you've got allies, colleagues, which are agents, instruments which can be generalized to artifacts which are also agents, publics that contains audiences that are also agents. So what you see is that each concrete implementation of the novelty model makes something emerge related to the type of the control elements. In this case, those are concepts. I think I'll show that later on. And in this case, those are agents. But so what we're trying to do with that is actually starting to understand how to design with that. So building an architecture. So to understand how to do that, you need to know the design research method a little bit, and basically you can subdivide the design method in two things. There is a world problem which needs to be useful, and there's a knowledge problems trying to understand the thing. So the world problem, we just seen knowledge creation and tacit knowledge exchange, well, like the Nonaka model, the literature. There's a much literature and innovation trying to express us how to make our knowledge useful, like the disruptive innovation, open innovation. There is a whole discussion about the discontinuous knowledge which you need to compete for future markets. So there's all kind of literature and innovation can use. And then of course there's the ongoing development of internet innovation, which is mostly based by a pragmatic need or practical opportunities, and not so much based on theory. So there are many different resources that can help you in combining them all. They become very useful basically. So but most of them are disconnected at this moment, so it would be interesting to see if we can actually integrate them. The other part is the understanding part. So there I would like to look at philosophy of media, like McLuhan talks about the media is message. There are many other philosophers and practitioners that inside of this domain that can be very useful. The quite other domain is the cognitive domain, where we explicitly like to refer to extended cognition, which is the idea that you don't just stick with your own brain and body, but you extend it into the environment. Like writing things on a whiteboard allows you to um, investigate the concepts in more detail. Other people trying to give us an understanding can be more um, let's say fundamented, like anthropological of science that really tries to understand the strange act of science. And there is the history of technology which we can learn from to understand how knowledge is a barrier for how knowledge also can be a barrier for change, and how mistakes were made in the past, or how successful stories were created in the past, and learn from that. And so that's part of the understanding. There's the other part that is very relevant to us is the systems and cybernetics, which is basically our research. But what we like most of in there is that it tries to create an understanding of architectures, and particular thinking about a book like from Herbert Simons that has the nice title "The Art of the Artificial." So what you try to understand is what do those control systems actually allow us to do. Now, architecture is well known in constructions, and I mean, if we talk about architecture, people think about buildings. So there you clearly see that the blueprint, which is the architect, can easily get constructed. In software engineering, definitely in object-oriented programming, they talk about object-oriented architecture. So there the link is also very clear. And I mean, in art, architecture is often considered an art. So there it's already clearly present. But I think the notion of architectures is still very underdeveloped in science, and it can actually be used in many more domains. Like the one thing we like in the current debates around the philosophy of media is this idea how you can mediate, and how artifacts mediate people, and people create the artifacts, and how that bootstrapping relation exists. So what we like to focus also on is the technology mediated social participation, which is kind of inspired by all the things happening on the internet at the moment. But how do you make such architectures? How do you mediate people to behave in a certain way so that everyone can improve on it? So what we then here like to show you is the novelty model, but now specifically applied for making knowledge emerge. And what you see there is that the different control elements now are concepts. So you create associations, like the first thing that pops into your mind if you think about something, right? So that's creating associations and increasing the workspace. The other things are quite pragmatically seeing what is out there and seeing how you connect it to the associations you create, and then or related to the challenges you previously defined. So here you see that we have associations, challenges, and additions, and they create experience. All of them are related to knowledge, to concepts. While in the next one, so this is going to be the first model. So the concept for creating knowledge is going to be the first model we are going to call the learning information system, and which is kind of so there is some other literature that can actually reinforce this model. Another model, but therefore I would refer also to the presentation on novelty, is when you replace the control elements not with concept this time, but this time with agents. So artifacts, allies, audiences, and peers are all kind of agents, and then it makes agency emerge. So what you try to do is create a group, like a group of researchers, which would be peers, working with some kind of instruments, which are the artifacts, in a certain workspace, and then they create maybe alliances with industry or with governance, or um, and that will actually start influencing the what you can do. And then of course there is the public opinion, the that's the audience to this research, or this novelty that is emerging, this new agent that starts playing a role. And instead of like in the previous model, you had the learning that leads to, or you articulate your knowledge, right, your model, or you try to master something like painting, driving a bike, whatever. You try to do it or you try to understand it. Basically, you see again that divide there. In the case of agency, you try to create something autonomous enough to be an agent. So it starts with a very weakly defined ecosystem where nothing is really autonomous. But what happens is when those artifacts, peers, and allies, and when they all get connected, they become more autonomous, and they become a real agent. And to that's like to the self again, to the self knowledge again. But on the other hand, you sometimes actually need to mobilize the world. Literally, this is, I mean, I think Latour calls it over here, mobilizing of the world, to create a micro world. Like, think about Manhattan Project or the Saturn Institute. It allows you to mobilize the world, so that you get an environment where the agent can actually exist. So, or you create the ecosystem that which sorry, here, by mobilizing you create an ecosystem where the agent can exist, or by automizing you create the agent as a more robust element in the in the existing ecosystem. But basically both are happening, of course, in a bootstrapping relation. So together they actually make the agents emerge. That's basically what's happening over here. Now, the first two models are the learning information system, the group information system, are based on other literature that we discovered that actually already had a novelty model. What we did to try to create an enterprise, an agile enterprise innovation planning architecture, is trying to figure out what we need more for breakthrough innovations. And basically what you see is that you always need a type of a type of element, control element to see what you create. Like, all these are concepts and you create knowledge, which is a concept. All these are agents and what you create is agency. So if you want to go to innovation, we actually have now two models creating novelty. So what we figured out is that the AIP system is actually a meta novelty model, and it gets mediated by four emerging novelties, and agency is one of them, and knowledge is one of them, and we added two more. The one we added is a strategy information system, and that should make values emerge. And I think this is mostly related to the strategy innovation literature, where like the open innovation has been very active at the moment. So this fits that kind of um, literature. But the like the brands mostly come from the research-based view. Bundles come from research-based view. The brands comes from very practical examples like IBM and Apple that are not sustained bankruptcy, basically because their brand was very strong. And networking, everyone recognizes the need for networking for creating anything. So this is what will become part of the strategy, and culture to autonomize the values. So we kind of just made this up, right? So the bundles, brand, networks, and cultures, they are a little bit tagged from the literature on strategy innovation management. We need to actually validate this still. The last one we added, that's kind of more related to, so the whole idea of the breakthrough innovation is that what you spin off is an incremental innovation. And therefore it's not so strange to see the very first phase you see with most innovation projects is kind of the last phase we will going to expect for the breakthrough innovations, where we try to spin off our incremental innovations. And what you see in most of the projects is that they start with a SWOT analysis, which is strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, which is one part of our control element. And then they do action planning. which requires a certain context and processes to operate in. So basically the SWOT analysis and action planning can explain those processes here. But now we actually don't find any literature talking about self-organizing spin-offs. So so what you see is that they always have this relation to internalizing, externalizing, directing, and learning. But over here, like the first, so learning IS group, IS strategy, operation. There's a reason why we have this order, basically because what we're gonna expect is, if you look at the innovation S curve, right, which is the orange line over here, which you can kind of relate to successive groups of, they call it successive group of customers, but we are actually looking at successive groups anyway. So it's groups, it's not just customers. Customers are the audience, but the artifact's going to be part of the group too, and allies and peers. So it's a little bit adapted, but this is basically what we're trying to see, is that there should be a normal distribution of people you're trying to, actors you're trying to get in, and this kind of makes your S curve become active. So the relation between so what I kind of trying to say is that you can split the innovation S curve, see it in relation to the successive groups, and subdivide the S curve to understand how to make things emerge. What we expect is that during every phase, one new novelty model will be active. So the first novelty model is the learning model that should create an artifact, something. I specifically like to use the word artifact because it refers to artificial, and in some cases you see that this artifact is really very vaguely defined after the first phase. So we split the S-curve in 5 phases. There's a premature phase. Most of them split it in 3 phases, but we actually added one more in the beginning and one more in the end. So in the premature phase, we expect this artifact to emerge, and that becomes a central focal point for your group creation to work on top of. So, but it's not, the artifact is not enough. You need a whole ecosystem to support that artifact, or trying to automate the artifact. Think about your mobile phone, or trying to create an ecosystem. Think about the electrical grid, or um, whatever other kind of network you create. So the internet, for example, right? That's more an ecosystem created than really one artifact. So so this is what we expect to happen during an incubation phase. So, but the first one, the learning management system, the learning information system, which is actually making knowledge emerge, it will not stop when more people are added to the challenge. Because I mean, you first, only for the learning, you only need the peers. Basically, you need researchers working on it, and they create the artifacts. So the first 2 things that will emerge are the peers and the artifacts, but then you need the audience as the allies to make anything useful. That's mostly in the research part of our validation. You try to find a partner to create a spin-off with, or you try to have people use your tool. So this is what you start creating in the group system. So the incubation is really where you see the very first projects happening and things trying out. Now, the growth phase, so in incubation phase, we don't really expect any clear value to exist. We expect the artifact itself as the entity you try to make useful. Like, I'm just gonna give an example that pops in my head. You try to understand quantum, and you're working on lasers, and the first lasers are these artifacts you want to make stable and make productive, but at that moment you are not yet thinking about useful application of the laser. This is something you expect more into the values, because you added those audiences, you added the public, and you added the allies. They will start putting more emphasis to value, to strategy. And this is what will happen. This is what I expect to happen once there are some projects happening here. Some value is defined, and when there's some value defined, you kind of can see a new phase happening. So in the group, in the incubation phase, there may be many projects next to each other. Like I just gave the example of lasers. There may be many different kind of lasers, but then a certain focus emerge, like creating a storage device, and then many of the different projects can be reshuffled, changed, and so you start creating bundles, you start creating brands, you make network works, and from all this stuff a certain culture should emerge, right? So this is what happens in the growth phase. Now the next phase is the landing phase. Basically it's so I split it, the maturity phase, to a landing phase and a maturity phase. And the landing phase, what we expect is that you try to spin off the breakthrough innovation. This means that you want it to be sustainable outside this way too complicated enterprise architecture, because you want to make it exist as an incremental innovation, which is based on these values, based on concrete knowledge, based on clear business ecosystem, or ecosystem just general. So then you really start getting to that strength, opportunities, and context and processes, and you try to see if you can actually have a concept there. So this is where we actually expect to end with. It's just before you get into the majority phase. So the majority phase is your incremental innovation, right? But we are trying to put more um, so managerial possibilities in front of. Although you need to see that in all of these cases, we are talking about quite abstract things. They are artifacts, but I can give an example of a laser, but every time the local knowledge will probably be different. That's how we get back to, where are we here? Nonaka's model, where basically you're trying to create a system, but the difference between the local knowledge and the generalized knowledge, um, you cannot say what is local. So the system we create doesn't say anything about the local. We are more like McLuhan's idea that the media is a message. So you try to create processes, to create events. Think about open space technology, which is also not defining the content so much, but is actually giving a vision, aggregating people around that vision, and then they make those people, they let them self-organize. So it's part of that kind of vision. You can actually see this knowledge spiral also in a different way. This is actually an adaptation of a model in action design research, which is a combination of action research and design research. And so you kind of have, in a very first phase, you see the successive groups now in a different way, right? Over here, you see the amount of people you expect during each phase. And over here, you see the accumulation of all the people. So that's more or less, right? Okay. Um, so what we can actually represent that as a kind of um, an oscillating, increasing oscillation. So you first start with the researchers and the innovators that create this artifact that can actually really be very unstable and very vaguely defined. But then once that exists, you kind of try to add lead developers. So kind of add this level to the design based on the experience with open source community. So what they have is they have core developers and they have custom developers. So that's a little bit how you need to see this. So you add the core developers to actually create a very first prototype. So I mean, this could be seen as an alpha release, right? Think about alpha, beta release as we use that now on the internet. Most people are still using things that are in beta release. If I'm not mistaken, I think Gmail is still in beta release, but I'm not certain about that. But many of the very useful tools are still in beta release. So there would be, over here, they would create products. So what we expect is an early adopters to use the prototype in an alpha release. And that allows actually the prototype to become custom developed and add a level that will convince the early majority, which will be adopted in the beta release, and you actually get to the product. And then you can have one more lead where you can really go to a lead service and use that to get in the late majority. But I expect actually then to product to shift to framework. Think about the App Store, where the App Store is more a framework where people can create their products on, right? So that's a little bit how you need to see that. And the last thing I'm going to tell you here is about experiments we have been trying to do on this system, because of course you need to validate your model. And from 2006 to 2010, we've been working on showing how you can make micro spin-offs emerge, which is basically part of a premature phase. There's another video about that. At the moment, we have multiple educational innovation projects, which we kind of seem to relate to a new trend, which may actually be a better way to describe Web 3.0, because basically Web 3.0 is often referred to as the semantic web, but semantic may be interesting for education, but I think that what is happening today is a lot more than just semantic. So the other thing what we can do is observing the incubation phase. I mean, this relates to this Web 3.0. First of all, we see a macro internet innovation trend, which Francis Heiligen has been working the last 20 years, called the global brain. It's considered a meta system transition from, but I'm not going to get into that because then I need to explain the origin of life, which I won't be doing. But basically what you see today is an emerging trend around educational innovation. Like, you could use Wikipedia at the moment for finding educational tutorials, but the medium is not really so YouTube is, for example, not really created to be educational. There are at the moment other mediums like Khan Academy that really tries to make people learn and act. So that's a trend that seems to be emerging, but it's getting out of the incubation phase, because many of those projects, you can find them on my course site. There are kind of videos there, like Hole in the Wall, One Laptop per Child, or Khan Academy. Most of them are like at least 5 to 10 years old, so they are leaving the incubation phase now, which can be a very interesting environment to observe and understand breakthrough innovations. So then we see the trend of open governance, which is at the moment very hot. But basically, you can see that open governance is part of this education innovation trend, because it's not about small talk anymore. Like most of the systems, the social software was about small talk, was about connecting people. I think now what you see is a shift from just connecting to problem solving, and that's a trend we can keep on observing. So let's wrap up and see where we're trying to do now. So first of all, we try to keep observing the macro trend, which we can see as Web X.0 iterations to the technological singularity. There is another video about that, but I'm not going to get too deep about iterations here. Basically, what you see is that every 10 years there seems to be a new wave. Is this true? Will this stay so? We don't know, but we'll try to observe it. The other thing is we can do very practical things on the micro trends. This relates, of course, to the micro spin-offs. And basically there you can clear focus on improving a personal life experience. Just have a look at the presentation about novelty, where you see that some of the most innovative understandings on cognition are extremely pragmatic in origin. And what we're trying, of course, to do with our research on let's say, the normal trends, which is between those very practical and those very theoretical level, is to continue with creating experiments. We have some more related to the premature phase. If we can find more partners, we can actually do some more related to the incubation phase, but start building this or validating this enterprise, this architecture for breakthrough innovations. And these are mostly focused on the self-organizing innovation, which I mean, some of the other videos talks about too. And that's basically what I wanted to say, right?